I didn't expect the sound of laughter at my own dinner table to sting as much as it did. It wasn't the warm, shared kind of laughter that fills a room and makes food taste better. It was sharp, cruel, and cutting. When my sister-in-law Vanessa leaned back in her chair with her manicured nails tapping against her wineglass and said, "Oh my God, this looks like prison food," the room went quiet. I stared at her for a second, heat rushing into my cheeks. Chicken pot pie I'd worked on for hours sat steaming in the center of the table, the crust perfectly golden, edges crimped like something out of a magazine. The salad I tossed with roasted pears and candied pecans glistened under the dining room light. And my cheesecake, a recipe I'd practiced 4 times before tonight, waited in the fridge. Yet all Vanessa saw was something to mock. She didn't stop there. She forked a piece of the pie onto her plate, inspected it like a jeweler might inspect a fake diamond, and shoved it into her mouth with exaggerated dramatics. Then, as if auditioning for a bad comedy sketch, she spat it back into her napkin. "Wow," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "No wonder my brother's so skinny. He probably starves on this." My husband, Mark, stiffened beside me, but he didn't say a word. He never did, not when it came to his sister. His jaw tightened, and he took a sip of water, eyes darting anywhere but mine. Something inside me cracked then. The hours of chopping, stirring, rolling, baking, the aching in my shoulders, the flour still dusting my hairline, the little notes I'd written to myself on sticky notes like, "Don't forget the time!" All of it felt stomped on by her careless words. I set my fork down, my hands surprisingly steady. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice calm though my heart pounded in my ears, "if you hate my cooking so much, you don't have to eat it. And you don't have to stay here either." Her eyes widened, caught off guard. She looked at Mark, as if expecting him to jump in and rescue her. But I didn't give her the chance. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood. "You can leave." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt in this house. My chest felt tight, but I didn't back down. Vanessa, still in shock, scoffed, grabbed her purse, and muttered something under her breath about me being too sensitive. The door clicked shut behind her, and just like that, dinner was ruined. Mark finally looked at me. His brown eyes, so often the safe harbor of my life, were stormy. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Didn't have to?" "Mark, she mocked me in my own home. In front of you. In front of everyone. What was I supposed to do? Smile and thank her for spitting out my food?" He rubbed the back of his neck, sighing. "You could have just ignored it. That's just how she is." And there it was, the excuse I'd heard 100 times before. That's just how Vanessa is. It wasn't always this way. When I first met her 5 years ago, she'd been almost charming in a chaotic, whirlwind sort of way. She was the life of every party, the first to crack a joke, the loudest laugh in any room. I thought maybe she was just the kind of person who had no filter, and I could live with that. But then came the little digs, the not-so-subtle jabs, the way she always made sure to remind me that she was Mark's sister before I was his wife. I remember one of the first times she ever cooked for us. She invited us over to her apartment, insisting she was trying out a new lasagna recipe she found online. We arrived to find her kitchen looking like a war zone, sauce splattered on the ceiling somehow, noodles half-boiled and sticking together in a clump, ricotta cheese curdling in a bowl on the counter. When she served it, the lasagna collapsed into a watery mess on the plate, layers sliding off like an avalanche. Mark and I exchanged a glance, and I bit my tongue so hard not to laugh. Vanessa, of course, burst into laughter herself and said, "Well, at least it's edible. Mostly." We ordered pizza that night, and I remember thinking, okay, so maybe she's not perfect, but she can laugh at herself. But that's the thing, she can laugh at herself, yet she never hesitated to laugh at others. Especially me. The first Thanksgiving I hosted after Mark and I got married, I roasted a turkey for the first time. I was nervous, terrified of drying it out or undercooking it. I basted it every 30 minutes, checked it with a thermometer 3 times, and when it finally came out golden brown and juicy, I felt a surge of pride. Everyone dug in happily, except Vanessa. She chewed slowly, theatrically, before saying, "Not bad. A little dry, though. But hey, first time, right?" She smirked as if she'd delivered the most generous compliment in the world. I'd brushed it off back then. I told myself she was just teasing, that maybe she didn't realize how much her words stung. But tonight? Tonight was different. Tonight, I couldn't pretend anymore. After she left, the rest of the evening limped on. Mark's parents shifted uncomfortably, his dad trying to make small talk about the weather while his mom picked at her salad in silence. Dessert went untouched. When they finally excused themselves, I was left with Mark in the kitchen, surrounded by half-eaten dishes that suddenly looked pitiful. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You embarrassed her." I spun around, incredulous. I embarrassed her? Mark, she embarrassed me. In my own house. She spit out my food. His face softened for a second, but then he shook his head. She's my sister. I can't just take sides. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling long after he fell asleep. My chest ached with something I couldn't quite name. Anger, sadness, frustration, maybe all of it tangled together. I thought back to all the little moments over the years, the times I'd bitten my tongue, the times I'd smiled through the insults. Why had I let it go on for so long? And yet, underneath the anger, there was something else too. A flicker of memory. Vanessa, laughing that night of the lasagna disaster, sauce on her cheek, shoulders shaking as she admitted she had no idea what she was doing in the kitchen. A version of her that wasn't so cruel, a version of her that maybe just didn't know how to connect without teasing. I hated that part of me still wanted to understand her. But I also knew one thing for certain, tonight had changed something. The line had been crossed, and I didn't know if things could ever go back to the way they were. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. For a moment, half asleep, I thought maybe everything that had happened the night before had been some strange dream. But when I rolled over and saw Mark sitting at the edge of the bed, scrolling on his phone with a stiff expression, reality came crashing back. He glanced at me when he noticed I was awake, then quickly looked back at his screen. She texted, he muttered. I rubbed my eyes. Vanessa. Yeah. He turned the phone so I could see the message. Tell your wife I didn't mean anything by it. She overreacted. I was just joking. My chest tightened. Overreacted. That word felt like a slap. How many times had I been told that in my life? Growing up with a sharp-tongued mother who thought criticism was love, I'd learned early on how easy it was for people to minimize my feelings with just 2 words. Overreacting. As if the problem wasn't their cruelty but my sensitivity. Mark must have noticed my expression because he sighed. She didn't mean to hurt you. I sat up, pulling the blanket around me. Mark, she spit out my food and called it prison food. How is that not meant to hurt me? He hesitated, then put his phone down. Look. Vanessa's always been like this. She doesn't think before she speaks. She's blunt. Blunt. Another word I hated. There's a difference between blunt honesty and intentional cruelty. But I knew arguing with Mark when it came to his sister was like trying to punch a brick wall. He loved her fiercely, even when she didn't deserve it. I pulled my knees up to my chest, resting my chin on them. Do you remember the first time I met her? Mark gave a half smile. Of course. My birthday dinner. You made that ridiculous triple-layer chocolate cake, and she almost dropped it trying to carry it to the table. Not almost. She did drop it, I reminded him, a reluctant laugh escaping me. Right on the floor. Face first. And then she blamed me for putting too much frosting on it so it was slippery. We both laughed a little, but the sound felt thin, fragile. Because that memory, though funny now, was also the first time I'd felt that sting of being the butt of her joke, that she'd pointed at the smashed cake and said, "Guess we'll see if Mark really loves you now, huh?" Everyone had chuckled, but something inside me had twisted. Over the years, it only escalated. The jabs about my clothes, my job, even my laugh. At first, I'd convinced myself she was just teasing, that she didn't know how else to bond. But now, after years of biting my tongue, I wasn't sure anymore. Still, for Mark's sake, I tried to remember her lighter side. And there were moments, I had to admit, when she'd been almost endearing. Like the time she decided to cook Thanksgiving dinner by herself as a surprise for the whole family. She'd been living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment at the time, with an oven that looked like it belonged in a dollhouse. She called me in a panic 2 hours before dinner because the turkey wasn't cooking. I rushed over, only to find she had stuffed a 20-pound turkey into an oven that couldn't fit more than a sheet pan. The door wouldn't even close properly. When I opened the oven, a wave of lukewarm air wafted out. The bird was raw, still cold in the middle, sitting in a puddle of its own juices. Vanessa was pacing in circles, waving a baster like it was a magic wand that might save the day. "It's fine," she kept saying, sweat beading on her forehead. "It just needs more time." "Vanessa," I said gently, trying not to laugh, "the oven isn't even set. You didn't turn it on." Her face had gone bright red, and then, much to my surprise, she burst out laughing. We ended up ordering Chinese takeout that year, and Vanessa turned it into a running joke, calling it the year of the Peking duck Thanksgiving. Everyone laughed about it for months. She could be funny. She could be light. She could even be sweet in fleeting moments. But those moments never seemed to outweigh the sting of her cruelty when it was aimed at me. Later that day, Mark's mom called. I could tell immediately from her tone that Vanessa had already spun her version of events. "Sweetheart," she said, I know things got heated last night, but Vanessa didn't mean to upset you. She just has a colorful sense of humor. Colorful. Another word. My jaw clenched. Mrs. Peterson, I said carefully. She mocked me in front of everyone and spit out my food. That's not humor. There was a pause on the line. Well, maybe she was just uncomfortable. You know how she gets. And she admires you in her own way. She just doesn't always know how to express it. I thanked her for calling and hung up, but my stomach churned. It was always the same pattern. Vanessa lashes out, everyone excuses her, and I'm left feeling like the villain for daring to be hurt. That night, Mark and I argued again. It started small, him asking if I'd consider apologizing just to keep the peace. But the words made me snap. Keep the peace. I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. The peace for who? For Vanessa? For your parents? What about me, Mark? Don't I get peace in my own home? He flinched and guilt gnawed at me, but I didn't stop. Years of swallowing my feelings were bubbling up, refusing to be contained anymore. You always defend her. Always. Do you have any idea how small that makes me feel? Mark stared at me, his face pale, lips pressed tight. For a long time, he didn't answer. Then he whispered, she's all I have left. The words hung heavy in the air. I knew what he meant. His father was sick, his mother fragile, and Vanessa was the only sibling he had. He felt responsible for her, like protecting her was his life's mission. I understood that. But where did that leave me? I lay awake again that night, staring into the dark, wondering if our marriage would always feel like a tug of war between me and Vanessa. Still, in the quiet moments when my anger cooled, another thought gnawed at me. Why was Vanessa like this? Was it really just cruelty, or was there something underneath it? Something I wasn't seeing? As much as I hated to admit it, a part of me wanted to find out. A week passed before I saw Vanessa again. For 7 days, the silence between us stretched, taut and unspoken, while Mark and I moved around each other in our own little Cold War. He didn't bring her up, and I didn't either. But I knew it was only a matter of time before something forced us into the same room. That something came sooner than expected. Mark's mom called again, her voice shaky, telling us his dad had been admitted to the hospital after another scare with his heart. Within an hour, we were rushing through the sterile white hallways, the smell of disinfectant clinging to my clothes, and there she was, Vanessa, pacing near the waiting room chairs, her arms folded tight across her chest. Our eyes met, and for a moment neither of us spoke. There was no smirk on her face this time, no cruel gleam in her eyes. She just looked tired. Pale. Smaller somehow. Mark went straight to her, hugging her, murmuring reassurances. I stood back, unsure where I fit. Felt strange, being the outsider in a family crisis when I was technically part of the family. Vanessa didn't even glance at me. Later, while Mark went in to see his dad, I found myself sitting across from her in the waiting room. TV mounted on the wall played some old sitcom rerun, the canned laughter a jarring contrast to the tension between us. She finally broke the silence. So, she said, her voice flat, are you here to make sure I don't spit in the hospital food too? I blinked, caught off guard. For a moment I almost laughed. Almost. But the bitterness in her tone made it clear it wasn't really a joke. Vanessa, I said carefully, I didn't kick you out because of one comment. It's been years of comments. Years of making me feel small. Her jaw tightened. She looked away, chewing on her thumbnail. You're just like everyone else. You think I'm a joke? That stung. I don't think you're a joke. Sure you do. She laughed, but it was hollow. You all do. Mom, Dad, Mark, even when I was a kid, it was always, Vanessa, why can't you be more like your brother? Vanessa, why can't you settle down, get a real job, act like an adult? I tried, okay? I tried cooking Thanksgiving. I tried hosting birthdays. I tried being the fun aunt. And it never mattered. I was still the screw-up. Her words tumbled out in a rush, rawer than I'd ever heard her. I sat frozen, unsure what to say. For years, I'd only seen her as sharp-edged, relentless in her teasing. But now, for the first time, I caught a glimpse of the insecurity underneath. You're not a screw-up, I said softly. She shot me a look, skeptical. Says the perfect wife with the perfect dinner parties. I almost laughed at that. Perfect? Me? If only she'd seen the tears I shed in the bathroom when her words cut too deep. If only she'd seen me pacing the kitchen, panicking over whether the pie crust would burn. But I didn't argue. 'Cause what good would it do? Mark returned before the conversation could go any further, and just like that, the moment was gone. Vanessa slipped back into her armor of sarcasm, rolling her eyes at the hospital coffee and complaining about the uncomfortable chairs. but I couldn't unhear what she'd confessed. That night when we got home, I told Mark about it. He looked surprised, then sad. I didn't know she felt that way, he admitted. I mean, I always knew she had insecurities, but she never talks about it. Maybe mocking people is how she hides it, I suggested. Mark rubbed his temples. Maybe. But it doesn't excuse the way she treats you. It was the first time I'd heard him say that, and it felt like a crack of light in the heavy fog between us. But the peace didn't last. 2 weeks later, his parents invited us all over for dinner, a family night, as his mom called it. I was hesitant, but Mark urged me to go. Maybe it's a chance to reset, he said. The evening started fine enough. His dad looked healthier, smiling as he carved the roast chicken. Conversation flowed easily, everyone avoiding the elephant in the room. Vanessa even complimented the wine I brought, though she said it in such a way that I couldn't tell if it was sincere or laced with irony. But then dessert came. His mom brought out a homemade apple pie, and Vanessa, perhaps emboldened by the wine, leaned back in her chair and said, "You know, maybe I should have spit out your cooking last time, too. Then at least I wouldn't be the bad guy." Table froze. My fork clattered against my plate. Mark's dad frowned. "Vanessa." "What?" she said, throwing her hands up. "I'm just saying, everyone acts like I committed a crime because I didn't like her pot pie." Big deal. Something inside me snapped. I'd held my tongue for years, but I couldn't anymore. It wasn't about the pot pie, Vanessa. It was about respect. You've been making fun of me since the day I joined this family. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to be laughed at every time I host, every time I cook, every time I try? Her eyes widened, and for once she didn't have a snappy comeback. The room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I didn't mean to humiliate you." I wanted to believe her. But belief would take time. The evening ended awkwardly, everyone retreating into their own corners. But as Mark and I drove home, he reached over and squeezed my hand. "I think she heard you tonight," he said. Maybe she did. Maybe for the first time Vanessa realized the weight of her words. But the real test would come later, the moment that would force all of us to face the truth about this family, and whether forgiveness was even possible. I thought maybe things would cool down after that night at his parents' house. For a little while it almost seemed like they had. Vanessa didn't text me, but she didn't text Mark angry rants either. A strange, uneasy silence stretched between us, like the calm before a storm. The storm arrived at Mark's birthday dinner. His parents had insisted on throwing a party at their house, inviting extended family and a few friends. I spent the morning helping his mom set the table, laying out candles and folding napkins into little triangles. Vanessa breezed in late, of course, wearing a sequin top that glittered under the chandelier. She hugged Mark with exaggerated enthusiasm, kissed both his cheeks, and completely ignored me. Fine. I thought. I can handle that. The evening moved along, wine flowing, laughter bubbling from cousins swapping old stories. For a moment it almost felt normal. Until Vanessa raised her glass. "To my brother," she announced loudly, her cheeks flushed from the wine. "The most patient man I know. Honestly, I don't know how you put up with half the stuff you do. Especially the food." The room went silent. My chest burned. Mark's eyes darted toward me, panic flickering in them, but he didn't say a word. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. "Enough, Vanessa." My voice was steady, though my hands trembled. "You've had your laughs. You've made me your punchline for years. But I'm done." Vanessa smirked, swirling her wine. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke." "No," I snapped. "It's not a joke. It's cruel. And you know what? I'm tired of everyone letting you get away with it." Gasps rippled through the table. Her smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered, leaning forward. "You think you've had it hard? Try being me for 5 minutes. Try being the family disappointment. The screw-up who can't do anything right. Maybe I make fun of you because it's easier than admitting I hate myself half the time." The words hit the room like shattered glass. Everyone froze. Even Mark. Vanessa's voice broke, trembling for the first time. "You think I don't know I'm a mess? You think I don't hear Mom comparing me to you, or to Mark, or to anyone who isn't me? Every holiday it's Vanessa, don't drink too much. Vanessa, don't ruin dinner this time. Vanessa, why can't you be more like your brother's wife?" She jabbed a finger at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yeah, I mean, but at least I'm not invisible." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's mom pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining with guilt. His dad cleared his throat but couldn't find words. And me, I just stood there, stunned, my anger tangled with something else now. Sadness. Understanding. Vanessa, I said softly, no one wants you to feel invisible. She laughed bitterly, swiping at her eyes. Too late for that. Then she stormed out, the door slamming behind her so hard the candles on the table flickered. The rest of the night was a blur. People murmured awkward excuses, plates were cleared in silence, and eventually it was just me, Mark, and his parents sitting in the living room. His mom's hands twisted in her lap, her face pale. I didn't realize, she whispered. I thought we were protecting her. By pointing out her flaws before the world could. By holding her to higher standards. But maybe we just broke her instead. Her words hung heavy in the air. For years, Vanessa had been the family clown, the one everyone teased, the one whose mistakes became running jokes. But what if all that teasing wasn't harmless? What if it had carved into her deeper than anyone had realized? Mark rubbed his temples, eyes closed. I should have seen it. She's my sister. I should have. His voice cracked and he didn't finish. I reached for his hand, squeezing it. You couldn't have known. None of us could. But now we do. And maybe that means we can actually help her instead of just excusing her. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Vanessa's words in my head, the way her voice cracked when she admitted she hated herself. For years, I'd only seen her as my tormentor, the woman who mocked me at every turn. But maybe she was also the girl who never felt good enough, who wore sarcasm like armor because it was the only way she knew how to survive. And as much as part of me still resented her, another part of me, against all odds, wanted to reach her. Question was how. It was 2 days before I saw her again. 2 long days of replaying the fight in my head, of wondering whether I'd gone too far or not far enough. 2 days of Mark pacing the kitchen, torn between his love for his sister and his loyalty to me. On the 3rd day, I was at the grocery store, pushing a cart full of vegetables down the produce aisle, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, if it isn't the master chef herself. I froze. Slowly, I turned. Vanessa stood there, a bag of apples in her hand, her hair pulled into a messy bun, mascara smudged under her eyes. She looked nothing like the sharp, glittering version of herself she usually presented. She looked tired. Human. I straightened my shoulders. Vanessa. She tossed the apples into her basket and leaned against the cart. Relax. I didn't come here to start another fight. Good, I said carefully. Because I'm too exhausted for one. For a moment, we just stood there, surrounded by the hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of shoppers. Then she sighed. Look, about the other night. I shouldn't have said what I said. I raised an eyebrow. Which part? The part where you mocked me again, or the part where you admitted you hate yourself? Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. Both. There it was, an opening. I took a deep breath. Vanessa, I'm not your enemy. I never wanted to be. But you make it impossible sometimes. Do you even realize how cruel you sound? She looked down at the floor tiles. I do. Afterwards. When I'm lying in bed replaying everything in my head. But in the moment, it's like I can't stop myself. The words just come out. Why? I pressed gently. Her eyes lifted to mine, raw and unguarded. Because if I'm the one making the joke, then I'm in control. If I point out my failures, or yours, before anyone else can, then maybe it won't hurt as much. I know it's twisted. But it's the only way I've learned to survive in this family. Her voice cracked, and suddenly she didn't look like the sharp-tongued sister-in-law who had tormented me for years. She looked like a girl who had grown up believing she'd never be good enough. I softened. Vanessa. I get it. I do. But survival isn't the same as connection. You push people away before they can get close. And it hurts. It hurts me. It hurts Mark. It even hurts your parents. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Do you know how many times Mom told me she wished I was more like Mark? Or more like you? I can't compete with perfect. So I don't try. I just burn it all down instead. My throat tightened. Perfect. She thought I was perfect. If only she knew how often I doubted myself, how often I cried after one of her jabs, how many nights I lay awake wondering if I'd ever really belong in this family. I'm not perfect, I whispered. I've just been trying. That's all. And honestly, I wanted us to be friends. I wanted to laugh with you, not be laughed at by you. For the first time, Vanessa's face crumpled. She pressed a hand to her mouth, a sob escaping despite her attempt to hold it back. I stepped closer, hesitating, then touched her arm. I don't hate you, Vanessa. I never did. I just want respect. That's all I've ever wanted. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't know how to be better. But I want to try. For Mark. For you. Maybe even for me. Something inside me shifted then, like a knot finally loosening after years of being pulled too tight. For the first time, I believed her. We stood there in the middle of the produce aisle, two women who had spent years circling each other like enemies, finally facing the truth. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully. But it was a start. When I got home, Mark was in the kitchen, chopping onions for dinner. He looked up when I walked in, eyes searching mine. Well, he asked. She wants to try, I said simply. Relief washed over his face, his shoulders sagging. Thank God. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, we could finally build something new. The first time Vanessa came back to our house after the grocery store truce, my stomach twisted itself into knots. I kept telling myself it was just dinner, just food, just another night, but we both knew it wasn't. It was a test. Mark set the table while I fussed with the roast in the oven. I caught myself smoothing the same tablecloth corner 3 times, nerves buzzing through my fingertips. You're overthinking it, Mark said, gently catching my hand. Of course I am, I muttered. What if she slips back into her old habits? What if this whole thing explodes again? He kissed my forehead. Then we deal with it together. But you have to give her the chance to show you she means it. The doorbell rang. My chest tightened. Vanessa stood there holding a casserole dish, wearing an expression I didn't recognize at first, nervous humility. I brought mac and cheese, she said. Then, almost sheepishly, and don't worry, I actually followed the recipe this time. No experiments. I couldn't help it, I laughed. So, no strawberry jelly mixed in with the cheese like last time? Her face turned pink. God, don't remind me. I swear, even my dog wouldn't eat that. Mark snorted behind me. I still remember the smell. Like burnt sugar and socks. And just like that, the tension cracked. We were laughing, real belly-deep laughter, the kind we hadn't shared in years. Dinner went surprisingly well. Vanessa didn't throw any barbs, didn't roll her eyes at my cooking. She actually asked for seconds of the roast and complimented the seasoning. My cheeks hurt from smiling, not from clenching my jaw. At one point, she set her fork down and looked at me seriously. I owe you both an apology. For everything. I've been awful and I know it. I don't expect you to forget it overnight, but I'm going to work on it. I want to be better. Mark reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you know. After dinner, she insisted on helping with the dishes. We ended up side by side at the sink, passing plates back and forth. It felt normal. Peaceful. Then, because fate has a sense of humor, she dropped a slippery plate into the suds and splashed herself in the face. We both froze for a second before bursting out laughing again, water dripping down her chin. Guess some things never change, she said, wiping her cheeks with a towel. Some things don't need to, I replied. That night, after she left, Mark and I curled up on the couch. He looked lighter than I'd seen him in months. Do you think this is real? He asked softly. I thought back to her smudged mascara in the grocery store, the crack in her voice when she admitted her fears, the way she laughed tonight without malice for the first time. Yeah, I said. I think it is. And for the first time since the night I'd kicked her out, I felt something I hadn't dared hope for. Not just peace, but the possibility of real family. It wouldn't be perfect. It never had been. But as I curled against Mark's shoulder, listening to the quiet hum of our home, I realized that perfect wasn't the goal. Understanding was. Respect was. And maybe finally love could be too. It's been 6 months since that dinner, and sometimes I still catch myself bracing for a jab that never comes. Old habits die hard, both hers and mine. But the air between us has shifted. There's more room for patience now, more space for laughter that doesn't sting. Vanessa actually calls me sometimes, not Mark me. The first time she did, I nearly dropped my phone. She wanted my recipe for roasted chicken of all things. Said her coworkers wouldn't stop raving about the non-burnt version she'd brought to a potluck. I teased her about how low the bar had been set, but underneath the joke was pride. She's learning. Not just cooking, though God knows that's still an adventure, but learning to be kinder, softer, more open. A few weeks ago, she invited us over for dinner at her apartment. I won't lie, I was terrified. Memories of her experiments haunted me all the way there. But when she served perfectly roasted salmon with lemon butter, I almost cried. Not because of the food itself, though it was good, but because of the care I could taste in it. She'd tried. She'd really tried. Afterward, we sat on her tiny balcony with glasses of wine, and she admitted something I'll never forget. "I used to think hating you was easier than liking you," she said, her voice low. "Because if I liked you, then I'd have to admit I envied you. And envy is ugly. I didn't want to face it. But I'm done with that. I want to build something real. Sisters, maybe? Or at least something close." I didn't answer right away. I just let the words settle between us, like seeds on soil that had finally been cleared of weeds. Maybe they'd take root, maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time, I believed they could. Mark watches all of this unfold with quiet gratitude. Sometimes I catch him looking between us like he can't quite believe the peace is real. And maybe it isn't permanent, nothing ever is, but it's a start. Looking back, I think about that night I kicked her out. For so long, I felt guilty about it, replaying the slam of the door, the shock on her face. But now I see it differently. That night was a breaking point, yes, but also a beginning. Crack in the foundation that let the light in. I don't know what the future holds for us. There will be more dinners, more awkward moments, maybe even more slip-ups. But I know this, I don't flinch when I hear her name anymore. I don't brace myself for cruelty when she walks into a room. Instead, I look at her and see someone who is flawed, yes, but trying. And in her, I also see a reflection of myself. Someone who isn't perfect either, but who is willing to forgive, to reach across the divide, to try again. And maybe that's what family really is. Not perfection. Not endless harmony. But a constant choosing of each other, even when it's hard, even when the history between you feels heavier than the present. Vanessa and I are still learning how to choose each other. But for the first time, I believe we will.